At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am one of the event coordinators for the NJS BDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on the behalf of Dr. Tendai Ndoro, the Regional Director, I would like to welcome you all to our Risk Resilience, a Common Sense Approach to Supply Chain Risk webinar. And for those of you here that may be unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, and to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those within Essex County. Our center here is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a public-private partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Now, our mission here is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, all of these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. So if you or your business is located within Essex County, feel free to visit our website at www.rnsbdc.com. And once you're on the site, on the top right-hand corner, we have a red button labeled Request Counseling. So clicking on that button will lead you to fill out some information about your business or your business idea. And within 24 to 48 hours, one of our consultants will reach out to you for an assessment. And for those of you here that are not in Essex County, feel free to visit our headquarters website at www.njsbdc.com. And on that website, you're able to type in your county and it will direct you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, your audio has been muted at this time, but we will be taking questions via the Q&A and the chat feature here on Zoom. So please feel free to post and ask your questions, and we'll do our best to respond during or at the end of today's webinar. A copy of the presentation slides, along with a video recording of this webinar, will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours so that you can refer to all the information in the future once this webinar has ended. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you all our presenter for today's webinar, Professor Joseph N. Agresta. Professor Agresta is an assistant professor in the Supply Chain Management Department at Rutgers University. And now, without further ado, I will turn today's presentation over to Professor Agresta.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Tico. I appreciate it. You always do such a professional job with your opening.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if I could top that, you know what I mean? But thank you. And welcome, everybody. So Ayana and Tong and Vanja, welcome. My name is Joe Agresta, like Tico said. I am assistant professor of supply chain at Rutgers. I did have an industry career. I spent 40 years. I spent 20 years at Allied Signal, which is now Honeywell, and then the last 20 years at J&J, and it's really great to be at Rutgers. If I may ask, Takoa, if I may ask Ayana and Tong and Vanja, what type of business are you in? That would maybe I could then think of examples too as I'm going through. Ayana, what type of business are you in?
Hello? Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes,
Hi.
we can hear you.
Yes, I have a digital illustration business. So essentially I offer two things, products and services. The services are commissions for any kind of character drawings or food drawings you might want. And then the products are my stickers, prints, posters, and merch.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Great, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing. Tong, how about yourself? What kind of business are you in?
Hi, I just started a new small business from my country, China. So I plan to export the small goods to America. So just the international trade.
Okay, great, great. Thank you. Welcome. Nice to meet you. And Vanja, how about yourself?
Hi, everyone. This is Vanya here. I am now starting an e-commerce.
Wow.
So I will kick off with a few simple clothing items, but the emphasis is on decoration that's on these items in form of positive, empowering messaging. In a nutshell, I imagine it growing into more of a platform that aims to empower.
That's great, Vanya. Wow, all entrepreneurs, fantastic. You guys can teach me. So good for you guys. That's fantastic. So
Thank you.
Oh, great. So let me start. Stop me anytime. We'll make it conversational. There's so much going on today, you know, with regard to resilience and risk and all of these things. And you guys are starting your businesses, and it looks like in some cases these are going to be global businesses, or at least pan-continental businesses too. So hopefully some of this will help your thinking. You may have received an email from me as well. I was telling Takao that we reached out to small businesses. Rutgers does client projects in the supply chain, where we help you with any supply chain type of projects that you may want. So you may have seen an email come across your desk and from me describing the program. So, you know, if you have any interest, certainly you can get to me. So let me share the screen. Let me get started. So Takao, I'm going to start sharing. Okay. All right, here we go. Share the sound, share. Good. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
I'm gonna put it in sometimes when I put it in presentation mode, it gets a little stuck. So I'll have to go back to this, but I'll do my best. Hopefully this the connection will be good today. So let's bear with me a second here. Please work. There we go. You seeing it larger than life now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay. So a little bit about me. I pretty much mentioned that. And it's been, you know, I spent most of my career in operations and supply chain and sourcing. Had an opportunity at a part of my career. I ran product lines in for Allied Signal in the space business. We made guidance systems, so technical type products that we did. And you know, after 39, 40 years, I decided to, you know, let me try to give back. Let me try to share things that I've learned, and got a great opportunity here at Rutgers. Like I mentioned, I'm responsible for the client project program at Rutgers, working with companies like yourselves. I also mentor soon to be veterans as they make the transition from the service into the commercial world, working on leadership program for persons with disabilities. And just like I said, trying to be able to give back. So I've been very fortunate in my career, and most importantly in my family life. So that's a little bit about me. So you know it, you guys see it, and I admire you because you're starting businesses amidst this little bit of turmoil, a little bit of bumpiness that we have. But I think that's great, because I think in a way that makes you look at things a lot more holistically than maybe you would have before. And I can say that even with most companies now, they're starting to look at things a lot more holistically. So I put this up here. You put on the TV, you hear about the supply chain, you know, and now it's the port situation and those types of things. And, you know, trying to, and I don't know that anybody could have anticipated fully the pandemic and some of the after effects of the pandemic and decisions that are made after that. but at the same time, it has brought things to light with regard to supply chain and supply chain risk. So just wanted to try to share with you a few things. You know, one of the things that I think it's important to consider, and you all being entrepreneurs, and I think can appreciate this. The pandemic did put a keen focus on how public, private, large, small look at risk. And at the end of the day, we are in what they call, and maybe you guys are familiar with this term, we are in a VUCA world, right? It's a world of volatility. It's a world of uncertainty. It's a world of complexity. It's a world of ambiguity. And at the end of the day, that doesn't mean we just throw up our hands and say, gosh, let's just plow forward. It's all about leadership. And you guys are all leaders, right? You're all leaders leading your company, trying to figure out how do we get into a competitive advantage. And if you take that approach, you're preparing, you're mitigating risk before it even happens. So, you know, I just want to keep it simple as well. Look at a few tools that maybe you could use, questions that you could ask yourself about your business with regard to risk. And also, it's really important, whether large or small, that you do have some type of business continuity plan. And in many cases, in all cases, that business continuity plan needs to be able to transcend itself into your suppliers, right? So you're exporting things from China, you're making your product, your garments, things like that. I mean, you're dependent on suppliers, and that continuity plan has to flow down to them. So just share some things about that. And then just some really simple ways to look at impact and the probability of something happening. So that's resilience. I call it a common sense approach, not to overcomplicate the matter. So we'll talk about some basic supply chain principles. And like I said, it's about leadership, right? It's about creating a framework in your organization in looking at risk and making sure that you have the right people, the right flow downs to your suppliers, the risk appetite that your company wants to take on. And then I'm also available if, you know, after this and you say, you know what, I have a question and I'd like to get in touch with you, I'll make myself available as well for your enterprise and wherever I could help. So that's just a little intro to the discussion. So, you know, you have these word maps here and, you know, we have to lead. You know, it's about resilience. It's about strength. It's about agility. It's about growth, those types of things, vision, all of which I believe you all have as entrepreneurs, and that's important. But when we think about resilience, this is my bias a bit. Today's supply chain, the definition of resilience, I think, is a little bit different today. In the past, and certainly, you know, something we want to accomplish is that you want to be able to recover. You want to be able to get back to where you were, right? We were here, we had this much sales, we had this much output. We want to get back to that after some kind of an event, a risk event that may happen. But today, you need to think about it from a more proactive end-to-end supply chain view, which means you're working on things before the risks even happen. And through your innovation, through those types of things, you can literally wind up in a better place after an event. Not to say that it's easy to get through a risk event, but you've already started. You've already started thinking about potential failure modes in your business or a potential hazard event. So you're already thinking about it. So to me and to others, the modern definition of resilience is always, and I think you all are doing this, goal orientation towards your vision. So your vision is not about, well, it's just about tomorrow. Your vision for all these businesses that you're started is about 3 years, 5 years from now. And so you're already working on things that you want to continue to work on, that in the event of an event, you've already started. You've already started. You're not waiting for the adversity to happen. You're being proactive. And, you know, from a day-to-day operational perspective, you're working on things every day, the small, the large and small, everyday challenges that come up in your business. And I remember, you know, a boss always saying to me, you know, and small things become big things, right? You let something go, let something fester, recognize that there's a potential risk element out there and not dealing with it. It may be small today, but really large tomorrow. So my point of departure, easier said than done, I know, but I think it is about your leadership. It's about working toward that longer term vision, looking what could be happening, should be happening, and putting things in place. And when that event happens, you're a lot more prepared, and most times you wind up in many cases better off than when it started. Okay, so that's today's view of supply chain resilience. So there's the VUCA world we talked about. Not to read through this, a little bit of an eye chart, but when you're thinking about things in your business and you think about complexity, you know, situation may have many connected parts, you know, and variables that may happen. The supply chain network may be complex. Some information is available or can be predicted, but a lot of it can be overwhelming to process. So it's complex. Lots of data points, lots of inputs. Could be a complex supply chain. All right. An example of that, and maybe you know, maybe you're seeing it, Tong, in your export business, right? You're doing business in many countries, all have unique regulatory environments, tariffs, cultural values. You have to process this, right? You have to attack it, you have to process it. And so it creates opportunity, right? One of the things that you may have to do in your organization, you know, you might have to restructure on how, on areas of responsibility and most importantly, expertise, right? Maybe it's a business that, you know, you need to have people in your organization that are not generalists, right? That are an expert in regulatory, an expert in export regulations and things like that. So complexity, it's there, it can be attacked, right? Conversely, you have a ambiguity, right? Things are just not clear, right? You're just starting these new businesses. Maybe there's not a precedent set for how this e-commerce business operates, or this export of these products operates. So there's ambiguity, all right? I think an example of that is you decide to move into an immature emerging market to launch products outside of your core competencies. And what do you want to do in that situation? You want to experiment, right? If I try this, what happens, right? And always design your experiments so that you can learn lessons from that. It's okay to experiment, particularly when you're going into a new space. You don't have a lot of data to rely on or whatever, or there's no precedent set or benchmarks for you to, you know, to support you. So the ambiguity, some of the characteristics and some of the approach, right? The volatility, boom, look what happened to us, you know, pandemic, right? It's unexpected, unstable. We don't know how long it's going to last, but we understand it, right? We know we're in a pandemic, right? We know we have to bring the cases down to a minimum, right? And there's tons of data on that. Knowledge about it is becoming even more and more available. So it's unexpected and it happens, and we're collecting data. The data is accessible, and certainly in the pandemic through the government means and all that good stuff. But we don't know how long it's going to last, right? Another example of that is prices, right? Look what's happening today with inflation a bit, right? Now, yes, some of it's demand, right? Some of it is policy, some of it is regulatory, whatever the case may be. Some of it may be our suppliers are now offline and we don't know when they're going to get back online, right? A hurricane just knocked them, knocked their plant totally out of commission. So from just intuitively, you build in some slack time, right? You devote your team, your company, your business to preparedness, right? And that really, we'll talk about business continuity plan a little bit later in this discussion, all right? It's an investment at times, but sometimes an investment that you have to take. So that's the volatility piece. And then uncertainty. Despite a lack of other information, you don't know what the root cause of what happened is, right? Things can change, but it's not a given, right? You have competitors, I think, in every one of your businesses, right? The digital illustration, the exports, the e-commerce. You have competitors. They may be launching products. They may get something out on the market before you. What does that do? How does that muddy the water for you and your products? All right, so that's uncertainty. So wherever you can, obviously invest in information, try to process that information. It's interesting, even at Johnson & Johnson, when I was putting together a supplier risk management team across the whole business, one of the things we started to do was look at not just the traditional data and information, but what's happening in social media. What are people saying? What are customers saying? What kind of complaints are we seeing? To try to, understand things a bit better, to try to reduce some of that uncertainty. So even though there's complexity, volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to be proactive in what we do in looking at risk. So again, VUCA equals opportunity. I won't read through this chart. Here's something that I tried to summarize this for you guys where it applies. And I think what you always have to ask yourself with regard to supply chain and or other areas are, what have been your biggest challenges, right? What have been your biggest challenges? So you can see on the right, I kind of put the categories there. So globalization, your supplier infrastructure, the digital transformation, are your customers changing? How do they expect to get product? Those types of things. Sustainability and sustainable products. Costs, right? Costs of core technologies. And then, of course, disruptive events. So I think you have to be, as an enterprise, as a company, think about some of these things where it applies and ask yourselves these questions. Has globalization, changed your business through localization, IP, intellectual property, trade conflicts? So we've had this big push towards globalization. Are things now changing? Are things going to be more local? Where, how is intellectual property going to be handled in the markets that you're in? Are there trade conflicts between some of the countries that you may be working in, and or even, even interstate, right? I don't want to say that there are trade conflicts interstate, but every state has different interstate commerce. So globalization, is it becoming more global? Is it where we're looking for more localization? I think what's happened during this pandemic is that companies obviously are looking at their networks, right? And where they're gonna be getting product and how they want to set up their supply chains. So important. And I guess because I spend so much time in the sourcing world, are your suppliers capable? I mean, are they really capable? Do you even understand their capability, right? And at the end of the day, are you a preferred customer? So that's important, you know, that it's funny. We think it's all about how do we look at our suppliers, but it's just as much as how they look at you. Are you a company that pays its bills, that shares its forecasting, that tries to do innovative things with you, that maybe makes a longer term commitment with you, with your company? Those are preferred customer type of characteristics that they look at because they're prioritizing who they want to do business with. So are your suppliers capable? And you guys know that in your respective businesses better than anyone, but it's something I think you always have to stay on top of. Really, really important because it can make a company very, very vulnerable. We are in the world of remote working. So have we adapted to the remote working? Are we being more productive in the remote working? And are we using data, right, even in its simplest form, to help us in our decision making, to analyze, to maybe be able to give us insights, look at maybe changing buying behaviors, or what we buy. So looking at data and analytics in a more how do I say, more frequently to give you insights, and even looking at some of that soft data about what's going on right out in the marketplaces and trying to create insights. The other thing that I think I'm finding, and I don't know whether you guys are finding it in your business, and if you are, just shout it out. Do you find that your customers want more customization or do they want more standard? I'm just curious if anybody wanted to share that. Like, are customers looking for more customization or a more standard type product / services? What are you all seeing? Anyone? Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, please. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so I'm in the art community, and right now, particularly here in America, there isn't really a big marketplace for aesthetic stickers. And if you're not familiar with aesthetic stickers, what they are basically really customized stickers with like more of an Asian feel to them. You see them in like the animes and the video games that kids play these days.
Okay.
So a lot of places are selling like regular stickers, like little circles, little stars. Those things aren't very aesthetic, and they're very easy to produce, and that's not what people want. They want really customized game characters.
Okay. Yep. That's a great example. But this is where I think some companies, you're very much aware of that, but this is where companies have to look at that and make a shift. I mean, do companies want more customization than standard, right? And then you may have to make not your companies, but potentially you have to really look at that, right? I think it's something we're seeing more and more. Coming from pharma, the big push in pharma is really to have, in a way, personalized medicines, right? And how do we work on that and give the right medicine or the right composition of the medicine depending on you as an individual patient situation, right? So we're seeing more and more of it, but it's not necessarily an easy shift for companies if they're have a standard type product or whatever, and that might be the niche and great that they're in, but it's just a question that you share. So thanks for sharing that. That was thank you for sharing that, Iana. That was a good example. Are you prepared, for, let's call it a climate event? Do you want to call it a hurricane or this or that? But I think what I wanted to stress here is the circular economy. you know, the whole cradle to cradle type, if it's a hard product, let's say, the whole cradle to cradle type of product where things should be recycled, that when they're done being used, they can come back to you and you could recycle and use maybe in your dresses or whatever. So that's something, because these are things that we need to start to think about that could bring risk into your business. One, if you can be a big part and a leader in the circular economy, fantastic. Two, if you try to, but you don't have the true capability, or your suppliers are not making a product for you in a sustainable way, you're going to introduce risk to your company. So it's something that it doesn't always hit you right away when you think about risk management or supply chain risk, but certainly sustainability, I think, great opportunity, but a potential risk if you don't know how you want to be able to handle it and or stay ahead of the marketplace. And then I'll show you a video a little bit later, but are we prepared for the next disruptive event? Right? Are we prepared for cyber attacks? So the whole cyber piece, and I'm not a cyber expert, but the whole cyber piece, right? The whole intrusion into our systems is something from a risk management perspective, supply chain, that needs to be looked at. You know, things, I mean, electronics or integrated circuits or memory, you know, things can be embedded, or software can be embedded in physical equipment we buy and we don't even know it, right? And we don't even know it. So just, I wanted to kind of summarize this. I'm sure that you all are thinking about a lot of these things, but again, the challenge, you ask yourselves, what are our biggest challenges? Is it the globalization, and how are we dealing that? Or are things shifting to more local markets and local production? Are our suppliers capable, right? Have we been able to establish this new way of working, basically? And how are we using data, right? How are we using data? And I think, and we didn't mention this here, we talked about customization, but yeah, customer preferences changing, buying behavior changing. So I think you all know this better than anybody. You know, demand management becomes really, really key in trying to get ahead of risk, and certainly events. So anyway, just to kind of set the stage for us as we continue our discussion. So setting the stage, there we go, right? So take a look at, just from a process standpoint, how we should look at creating a risk culture. And when I say a risk culture, I don't mean that in the negative sense. I mean it more in the proactive, resilient sense. Understanding the value chain, a little bit about concepts. So we'll stop. Any questions? Any experiences you want to share, or any questions? You guys okay? All right. All right. I worked on this when I was at J&J, and I did work on this with McKinsey, the consultant, and it's just a kind of a outline for you about risk leadership, right? So at first, you know, step one, and you all can read this, but the insights, and pardon me, I'm not the best chart maker here, so the insights and risk transparency, right? You need to determine what objectives for our company could be at risk, things that really, really matter. Is it demand at risk? Is cost at risk? Is quality at risk, for whatever reasons? So I think you need to have that insight almost as step one. But then when you take that resilient perspective, you know, what upside opportunities are at stake, right? Maybe you have a practice in a marketplace that can really get ahead of your competitors, right? So what upside opportunities are at stake? And the other thing, and it's easy to say, your end-to-end supply chain. So everything from when you're designing your digital process to your process of exporting your e-commerce business, do you know what that end-to-end is, and are those points connected? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So insights, right? Insights. The other thing that I think is important, and from a big company perspective where I came from, one of the things that I think from a supply chain perspective that we really had to reinforce with supply chain people, you got people doing procurement and planning and whatever, they really need to understand the products, where they're being made, right? The businesses that are being made, standard processes that they're made, okay? So being able to have this transparency at every level in the organization, and maybe your organizations are smaller, and that's okay, but if you, the owner, are the only one who knows this stuff, it could affect how you operate, or there may be risks that can come up that you might have blind spots. You might have blind spots. You want to then think about how much risk am I willing to take on? And I'm sure from just an entrepreneurial perspective, you all have thought about those things. So what is your risk appetite? Where do you see the biggest risk? What's going to have the biggest impact? And when I say risk appetite, it might be, this is so big, we just have to try to get through it. Or maybe we need to share the risk. I'll give you, for instance, maybe you're developing a product or a service with a third party. It's becoming expensive. Maybe you share that risk of that new product development. Or maybe you're exporting, right? Like Tong is exporting, and you have to be very much aware of the channels of your product and where they're going. Although today there's a lot of jam ups, I'm sure you're feeling that a bit, Tong. But if you know that maybe I'll make something up, if the airport in Rome is going to have a strike, which they do kind of often, you may want to reroute. So you want to look at the likelihood and the preparedness. I have a chart on this later. So you're starting to look at, these are the concentrations of risk. I've categorized them. And now to decide, what's the impact? What is the probability of it happening? Because it's not like you got to work on everything. You can't. And then how prepared are we, right? So that's kind of the strategy and the appetite piece, as you see here. The other thing, just embed in everything you do, looking at the risks. So even in your functional areas or people that you work in certain areas, that they're looking at risk from a supplier perspective, from a plant perspective, from a design perspective, from a project management perspective. And so decisions, revolve around that. The other thing that becomes super important, and I found this and I didn't really realize it, I would say maybe mid-career, and I was in a long career, but governance around this becomes really important. So even in your company, if it's you and your partner, and maybe you're the governance around the risk, and maybe yourself is more concerned with the more strategic risk, and maybe what's going on around the world, and maybe one of you is more overseeing the operational risk. Having that governance and that leadership ownership is super important, right? I mean, we all want to empower our people, absolutely, but having that ownership at the leadership level is really, really important. And, you know, it could cascade itself. And you go to a big company, you know, some certain senior leaders look after this piece, certain people look after sustainability, if you will, supply chain, but a governance, because a governance will help aid you in the conversation. And so where you can, where you maybe need to invest, make sure that roles and responsibilities are assigned and all that kind of stuff. And then fourthly, creating the culture within your company. And, you know, sometimes you think just intellectually, it's like, yeah, we should be doing all these things and looking at all these things. But, you know, sometimes people think they're doing risk management and they're not. You know, sometimes they're just expediting, and they think because they're expediting something, they're expediting the import or the stickers or whatever, that's risk management. And it's not. It should be the exception, not the rule. And so to create this environment where if you're expediting a lot, what is the root cause? And people will be curious about what's the root cause of why this is happening. And the other thing that I have found, and in my experience, is having a speak up culture within your business and within your supplier's business becomes super important, where people will see something and speak up about it. And then, you know, there are supply chain practices you can take to try to get to root cause and to fix the problem, you know, through Kaizen and all those kind of things. We won't get into that today, but the operative thing is have a speak up culture, because you guys, as owners of your companies, you're going to have blind spots. And if you don't have a speak up culture within the business where people know, hey, these are the things that we should be looking at. These are the areas that are really important to the business and our products. And I see something that's not quite right. That's really super important. Okay. And I'm sure that you all are doing that, but just to reinforce it. So if you looked at best practices, these would be best practices. And I think I was on this one so long, it got stuck. Let's see. So I apologize. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to have to reshare. So bear with me. I'm sorry. Oops. Okay. Now it's just moved, but now I have to get back to share. Trying to get faster at this, guys. So here we go. All right. Are you seeing this where it says the value chain?
Yes, we are.
You are? Okay. Is there any questions while I'm fiddling around with this, trying to get this to change? Any questions or any experiences you'd like to share? Okay. Just jump in at any time. Again, I think something that you guys understand very well is the value chain, right? You know, from a supply chain perspective, you guys all know your customers and all that. You run these businesses, you've started these businesses. But just from an overarching supply chain perspective, supply chain people need to understand their customers, need to understand the competition, and they need to understand the markets, right? So it's not just, I'm just buying this or I'm just planning this. It's really important. And then when you understand that, you'll start to say, what types of processes, what standard processes do we need to put in place? And I call those enterprise-wide processes. But what processes do we need to put in place? Because to support our customers and our markets and our operation. So that might be, you know what? we have a horrible, I'll make this up, we got a terrible procurement process. We do it 5 different ways. We don't develop any partnerships with our suppliers. They don't share their innovations with us. So I'm just using that as an example. What's an enterprise process that you would put in across your company, right? That would be consistent in the way you do that. So that's the second level. And then the third level is making sure that you have end-to-end connectivity, right? And they call that product supply execution, so that the planning group is connected to the sourcing group, that's connected to the manufacturing group, that's connected to the logistics group. There needs to be that end-to-end connectivity. Overarching things also like environmental health and safety, if it pertains in your area, quality, of course. So that what we call product supply execution is really, really critical, because you could make decisions in one area that, if not done in a connected way, will drive the other area, in the wrong direction, right? Not having a halfway decent demand management process where you understand demand is going to drive your supply base. And if it's always wrong or way off, you're going to be, supplier commitments are going to be fluctuating like crazy. It creates risk. So end-to-end connectivity. So I do have a picture, but I think I got stuck again here. This is crazy. So let me just try this again. Okay. Sorry, guys. This sometimes I'm going to use this one here. Okay. I think if it's okay with you guys, I will I'll stay out of the presentation mode. You still should be able to see everything pretty good, okay? Otherwise, it's just going to keep getting stuck on me. So we talked about the value chain. Just got stuck on me again. Sorry, Jacoa. I'm not sure what's happening.
No worries, no worries.
I feel like I'm at the control center here, but you see, I'm not going to panic. I am not going to panic. Here we go. We'll get it. Okay, I got it. Here we go. All right. So this is just a picture of what I was talking about. High level, right? You understand, you know this better than I do. You guys are running businesses. You understand the market you're in, the basis of competition, what are the market needs, what differentiated value do you want to give in that marketplace? So that's level one. And from a supply chain perspective too, when you understand that, you make decisions. Do we need a warehouse here? Do we need suppliers here? Right? Are our competitors using all of the best suppliers? All those kind of things, right? Where is the innovation? Where is the expertise? So that's level one. Level two is really, they call it product and portfolio management, but it's basically, you always want to be on a continuous improvement journey. So what processes do you want to put in place that cut across your business? Well, you know what? We need a network. We need to understand, we need a network process, right? So if we're going to put warehouses all over the place, we need to have a process that helps us make those decisions and all those things. Or maybe we need to have a process, a basic process on how we launch a product or service. Like we can't do it one way and then next time we do it another way. We need to have a consistent process. So whatever pertains to you, you have that consistent process. And then product supply execution is really the connection of all the things that you do, right? It's the integrated approach. I think what happens in many companies, large and small, there can be a very siloed, although you have the functions and the functions operate pretty well. You could they're siloed and there's not connected. And a decision in one place can have an adverse decision and or introduce risk in another place. And so that becomes really important. So whatever you do in your processes, try to make them as connected as they can be, even if you just put a simple diagnostic together about things. And one of the things I worked on was, from a sourcing perspective at Johnson & Johnson, putting a diagnostic together on how our sourcing affected all of the other functions, and all the other functions did the same. Okay. So anyway, that's the value chain. That's the picture of the word chart that I gave you. And so if you look at it, this is just an example, right? And things that you could look at when you're doing, and again, just an example, not all inclusive. So NPI is new product introduction. I mean, is your production process robust enough? I mean, do you have yields in your product and services that, you know, that are going to put a robust product out into the marketplace, right? I mean, that becomes important. Are the products that you're designing, are they scalable? It's great. It worked for 5 units. It works great, but for 5,000, it doesn't work great. Or do you really understand the regulatory requirements and standards on quality? And I would add to that also on, you know, on commerce as well, right? So when you're doing your new product introduction, certainly in the planning phase, understanding the macro environment, you know, what you see. None of us have a crystal ball, but really being attentive to certain indices and things like that, to be forward looking at the microeconomic environment. And maybe you don't have, and this is something I know you all are working on, you know, to get as much transparency as you can to eliminate that uncertainty and ambiguity in changes in buying behavior. And you're seeing that, right? And you're seeing that, right? Customers don't want just the standard sticker. They want the, you know, they want the personalized sticker, right? And how they buy it may be different. So anyway, just an example. If you look at the sourcing, you know, are you sourcing things within compliance? Do you have good, you know, I don't mean overcomplicated contractual arrangements. And if for some, that's, you know, helps reduce risk, but, you know, a supplier shortfall could be a result of a breach, or maybe the supplier really doesn't have the capacity to do what you need them to do, and you really didn't check it out before, which becomes super important. With a lot of sometimes smaller companies, but some large, you know, there could be bankruptcy, there could be financial issues. You guys saw what, you know, what happened in the late 2000s in the financial crisis. From a manufacturing perspective, again, is your equipment, are the tools you have to make your product, are they viable? Are they working? Are they robust? Right? You have to ask yourself these questions. And again, it goes back to yield too. So even in a software solution or an e-commerce solution, I mean, there's the product, but then there's the platform. And if the platform shuts down when somebody's trying to place an order, more times than not, that's a problem, right? And the like. So I don't read through all this, but just gives you some examples how you want to make sure that things are connected. Okay. So just a couple of tools that I'll share with you. The first thing is what I call a product risk categorization. So on each parameter, you would put what's the most important strategic thing for your company. Maybe it's a sustainable product, maybe it's speed, whatever it is. It's coming from you and your company and where you want it, what's going to take your company into the future. and you decide what those things are. And then I'll give you an example here if you can see it. So I'll just give you an example of the, see if I can move this up. I'm sorry. Back. I don't know if you could see the bottom here, but so for Johnson & Johnson, we had, because we were a healthcare company, public health and Trustmark was critical for us. All right, so that's one axis. And financials, and you could look at that in terms of revenue penetration in markets, which really translates itself into reaching patients, right, in those markets. So these were our strategic values. And for your company, just to take a step back and to say, what are our strategic values? It may be speed, right? It may be sustainable products, maybe innovation, whatever it is that are your values. And a very simple 2-axis format. And then what you do is you look at your products or your offerings, right? And you plot it. And you plot it, right? And you plot it. Because what you're looking for, what you're trying to look for are, let me go back. What are those type 1 products? So what are those products? And if you can see, obviously, if it lands in the upper right-hand corner, these are products and everything. This tool doesn't tell you what the risk is, but it starts to tell you, you know what, we better really take a close look at our type 1 products. All right, we better take a look at our type 1 products. And so this, you just plot it. You just plot it as an example. It really helps because sometimes you want to do everything. You know, you have to see your products in the light of the strategic direction that your company wants to go. And so this really helps. So just as a quick example, you know, if product A is critical to the Trustmark, I'll use the J&J example. If product A is critical to the Trustmark of the company and has a high revenue, obviously it's going to land up as a type 1 product. And so that tells us we need to really, I say, peel the onion on that product and understand where the risk may lie. Okay. Maybe another example is product B has a, where's my mouse here? Product B has a mid-level revenue, okay, for the company where many companies can supply the product. So the thinking is a little bit here, and this can be more complex than it seems because you can think of it in a couple different ways. Certainly, you know it's got a mid-level revenue. The fact that other companies can make the product means that, you know, if there was something to happen with an oncology drug or whatever the case may be, that there would be other medicines out there. All right, there would be other medicines out there. But, you know, you have to ask yourself, and this is what you could debate, right? As a team, do we still want to consider that a type 1 product, or is that maybe a type 2 product? I think it lands in, you know, 1 or 2 of those zones, right? And you have to dig deep and have the conversation. And then another example could be product C has a low revenue and a declining technology. Things are going to go obsolete. You may be wanting to get out of the business, and you know that might lend itself to be more of a commodity type of thing, and that might be more of a type 3 product. So all this does for you and your companies is just to say, look at our strategic values on a 2-dimensional scale, and where do our products and or services fit? Does that make sense? I mean, you're probably doing that now in some way, shape, or form. But it's very, very helpful because it helps you prioritize where you need to be looking at risk. All right, any questions on that? All right, okay. So one simple, super simple tool. Now, the one thing to remember This doesn't tell you what the risk is. This is just telling you, you know what, we better do a deep dive. We better do a deep dive. That's not to say there's not going to be risk in the low area, but you need to do a deep dive on those type ones. First priority. We need to start looking at that. So as your businesses grow and you have multi-product offerings, you know, you should be looking at those types of things. Okay. You know, so what are you going to do? You're going to, once you do that, and I try to keep this, I don't want to say make a simple process of it. Once you do that, brainstorm this product A. What do we think these potential risks can be? All right. And what you also try to do too is you try to categorize them as well. So you brainstorm. You guys probably know this better than I as you started your businesses, but you brainstorm, you categorize, and then you start to look at, all right, what's the probability of risk? What's the impact of the risk? Now you're starting to really dig in. And once you start to see probability and impact on a very simple measurement system, which we'll show you in a second, right? You then can prioritize and create your mitigation plan if in fact it's something you want to mitigate. It might be something you accept, but it might probably more chances than not, it's going to be a risk that you may want to mitigate. What contingencies are there, right? What is a trigger point to make sure that things start? Okay, so that's your planning. Now you know your products. Now your brains, you're doing the deep dive on, let's just say, the type ones. You're brainstorming. You're categorizing the types of risk: supplier risk, technology risk, regulatory risk, whatever they are, natural disasters. And you say, let's look at the probability, let's look at the impact. And it's only then when I think that you can start to create a good, a good plan going forward. So I think I just said this without looking at the chart, right? But identify the process, the part, the supplier that you're concerned about. Think about what could go wrong. And there may be signals that you're seeing in your supply base or whatever. The supplier is delivering late, or a service they're supposed to give you is consistently late, right? Those types of things. You start to see signs. So you think about what could go wrong. And then you think about, how is this going to affect our project, our product, our service? So that's kind of the brainstorming piece, see in a little green here. And then, of course, you quantify the likelihood and you start to see the severity and you decide what you want to do. So that's just the beginning of your process. So if you just look at it pictorially, right, you're looking at the impact. What is the potential impact? What is the likelihood? And what actions do we have to take to reduce the impact? So forward, resilient, like we talked about at the beginning of this session, actions to reduce that impact. And another piece of that would be to develop a business continuity plan. Once you kind of figure out impact, likelihood, and how prepared you are, you could figure out what your exposure would be, right? You can figure out what your exposure might be based on that, right? Our revenue will go down by this. We could lose X amount of customers. We will be exposed because we will have a supplier that will not be able to meet our demand, or whatever. So impact times likelihood times preparedness can show you what your exposure is. So what I just talked you through and is just a pictorial. I actually should have put maybe this chart a little bit sooner. Here's your baseline. Here's your brainstorm. Using a very similar methodology to the product portfolio thing that we talked about, you plot it, impact, probability. So of all these things, where does it all fall? You can then categorize the risk. So right now, you may have several in the red that are supply type issues, or you may have several in the red that are design issues or whatever, equipment. You can then categorize them, okay? And then you'll do your prioritization. So this is just a visual of that. And then of course you do your mitigation planning. All right, so if you just visualize, baseline, brainstorm, impact probability, categorization, boom. Now we know what we want to do. Now we know how to get after this. So this is a really simple one that I just showed, right? So this is a likelihood severity tool. So a tornado, description of the impact. We're going to shut down our factory until it's repaired. We'll shut down our service, shut down our design center, whatever. Maybe the probability of risk of that is 1. You're in an area that, never gets tornadoes, but the severity of impact is a 5. So that's a 5. But now go down to the last one, machine failure. So if the machines fail, you're unable to manufacture the products. The probability of risk is 5 in this one. That's scary. Boy, when I was running a factory, if someone told me the probability of risk of our machines shutting down, I'll tell you, that's like a major traffic light, right? That's a major red light. But in this case, it's just an example. It's a 5. That's not good. And the severity is a 4. Maybe we can offshoot some things to other places. So in looking at this, you looked at 3 areas of risk that you got from your brainstorming. And you said, you know what, we better get on this machine failure, like now, right? That is a 9. We need to understand it. We need to get the root cause. We need to fix. Okay, guys? So it's just simple ways to start to look at this stuff. In your business, this is just an example. I think you should always at least have a scale. Have a scale so you're all talking the same language. So if something pops up as a 5, I just use this as an example. Whatever scale it is that you want to use, have a scale so you're consistently using the same language. And once you know what risks you want to tackle, right? That you said, yep, the machine failure, we've got to get after that. You create the risk statement. All right. You state the issue and the impact on the product or service. The issue should affect a product or service deliverable, something that you're going to deliver. It provides, what are you going to do? What are those first steps you're going to do in analyzing the impact? You're not going to solve the problem with the risk statement. You've recognized there's a risk. You've recognized where it affects your product or service. You've done the initial analysis, but you're not going to solve it in 5 seconds, right? So you will then work those solutions. You'll work through those steps. And I have a template here for you. And in your risk statement, you'll have the issue, the deliverable, your milestones, triggering events, those types of things. So it's a tool just to stay organized, to document what you're working on. And then, this is just an example of a risk statement tool, that you're going to put what you're going to do, the type of risk that it is. Do you want to accept it? Do you want to watch it? Do you want to mitigate it? There might be a triggering event for if it's a watch, like if something happens, you're going to do this. The area of responsibility, who owns it, okay, and the like. So just a template for you. All right. Any questions? I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but it's trying to tell a story, right, of risk, of some tools for risk. Any questions? And I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, you're doing this type of thing. I think it is important to be disciplined and to document, not to overcomplicate, but certainly document your brainstorming, your categorization, and the like. So one thing that I have for you that Nicole will send you, and this is just a snapshot of it. I have an Excel tool for you that you could look at where you are. So it's a maturity model. This is just a snapshot. We will send you the Excel sheet. And it looks at the leadership, how things are connected. It looks at planning. Let me see if I try to get this one in presentation mode, make it a little bit easier to see for you. Hopefully it won't get stuck. And so it'll look at planning, how you deal with demand. And what you do is you just take this and you score yourself. And you say, where are we? Are we being proactive? Are we just being reactive? So it goes through 5 categories, 5 category areas. So this is a snapshot. It's a great tool for you to be introspective, to look at where do you think we are. And what you will do with this is that you'll probably pick 2 or so items that you say, you know what, this year we're gonna work on this, right? We're gonna work on this. We have no governance, right? We have no framework for supply chain risk, none. We just deal with it every day. We expedite every day. And so you say, you know what, we want to start to get, for the next 6 months, we want to get into that aware state. So we want our functional managers or a leader of a process that you may have to become more aware, blah, 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 blah. So we will send this to you.